I know you like. I know you like to play. What's his name? Guy Hairbrush. Those.
Guybrush Threepwood.
Yeah, Guybrush.
Guy Hairbrush.
Someone's like, guys, hairbrush.
Like a Veggie Tales episode.
What's great is I always tease Banana because he sounds like him. It's like he could be the voice actor.
And they still haven't called about a job. It's horseshit. I don't know. I feel like Com has never had a conversation with another human being before based on that expression.
I got really into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, have you never been introduced to another person? Is that what you do?
It's felt like I was doing my ring walks in the boxing. This is
The
great.
only AMKomnenos.
We'll get the UFC guys shouting that as well for 2 seconds. Yes.
You need to come down the stage with all the strobes, all the lights.
Oh, I'm not the kind of person you could ever do that to. I would really find myself wondering, why isn't this always the case?
Yeah.
Why don't people do this for me everywhere?
Yeah.
Idiots.
This is the norm. This is my norm. Yeah.
I am always this awesome. Why is this not always playing around? Like,
Yeah, I'm doing
why don't I
nothing
have
different.
my own theme music?
And that's the scene where like Tom just walks up to the stage instead of actually like prance. He's just walking because
just another Thursday.
Oh, my brain is doing theme music. Komnenos. Da, 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 da.
we definitely need a theme song, which you could provide for us. You just have
Please
yet
don't
to
cut
do
one
it.
in now that's shit. Please don't.
I just have the theme for Sanford and Son playing in my head, and like it's not like it doesn't fit at all. But it's a great theme, so I like it.
Before we begin, the Gamers Advocate would like to remind you that any episode could contain game spoilers, so watch or listen with discretion. And now your hosts, AMKomnenos, Banana, and Legion. Enjoy the show.
Well, welcome on in to yet another episode of the Gamers Advocate. Appreciate everybody being here. We have BananaHammockRepublic, AMKomnenos, and myself, Legion. And, well, we... Did I catch you off guard again? One thing that came up that was seemingly interesting to us.
Just the three of us and no one else.
Is console gaming and how to, keep it relevant over the years, which is a really interesting idea because you have classic like Atari, NES, things like that. And you do see how they resurrect themselves in various formats. Even Nintendo, I think very recently came up with a little kind of like a USB type game that was almost like exactly like the original NES, but it had every single game in their library on it. Now, I don't really know how that works. I don't know if you just directly plug that to your TV or whatever, but it looked kind of like it needed. But again, it was just another way for the console to kind of keep themselves relevant to, the history of gaming.
Yeah, I think that's... I've seen advertisements for a lot of those things where it's like every Nintendo Entertainment System game on a USB drive. I don't know. I feel like that kind of gets into this like this gray area as far as who actually owns that like intellectual property. And I mean, I'm no expert, but I think it's one of those things where like you kind of get away with it because no one cares anymore. People aren't making money off of that intellectual property anymore. So investing in the legal battle to really establish ownership might not even be worth their time. But it is one of those things. It's kind of like an artifact of our appreciation for gaming and our desire to retain some of the games that there is no financial benefit for a company to continue investing in. There's no reason for them to kind of maintain the properties to keep that going. But we don't want to let them go. Like, we as gamers have our favorites from older consoles, so we want to find a way to go back to those, play them even on, a console that doesn't compare to modern technology. We still have that kind of nostalgic feeling, that enjoyment of a game that's really not technologically keeping up, but it has some fond memories for us.
Well, I think you can see that actually. I was looking in the Steam year in review a couple of days ago with a few friends and just seeing what we'd done and what our habits were. And one of the things that it surprised me for a few reasons at first. And it was, what percentage of your time did you spend playing new, recent, and classic games? So new games were from this year. Recent is the last 1 to 7 years. Classic was 8 years ago and prior. Which obviously is an odd thought because games then like Dragon Age Inquisition are in the classic games, which does feel a bit odd because I don't mean in the sense of, oh, we're getting older. Who could believe it? That was 10 years ago. Yeah, it fucking was, obviously. It just doesn't feel like a classic game because of how little we've made those leaps forward since that day. If you think of how much gaming technology jumped between 1999 and 2001, for example, or 1996, 1997, there was quantum leaps. Now everything's a bit more unnoticeable. You will just see like, oh, this one is slightly better in X or whatever it might be. It's not as immediately visually jarring. But those classic games released from 8 or more years ago, for the average users, it doesn't say what kind of average, 37% of their time was spent playing games that were 8 or more years old. 37% of their gaming time. That's a massive number. And if you then just bring that out to the rest of the gaming world, the time you spend on your phone, the time you spend on your console, the time you spend outside of Steam, outside of GOG, wherever it might be, I would imagine a huge amount of gamers, we spend our time wanting to recapture something from when we were younger. So we want to go back and play those games that we enjoyed when we were younger, that we loved when we were younger. And if you just think about, bear with me a second because I've lost the word I was looking for. Hold on. It's going to come straight back and it's going to be amazing.
Horseradish.
Anyway, shut your mouth.
Pumpernickel.
I think that's a no.
That was it. Who'd have thought? No, just that quest for what was left behind. And I wonder how much of that time was spent playing games that were more than 15 years old, more than 20 years old, more than 25 years old, and how much of that would have been spent on those if they were all available to us to this day.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. You mean I just can't keep playing Baldur's Gate 1 and 2?
You absolutely can. If we can keep playing Final Fantasy 7, you can do that.
I was actually surprised to find that most of my gaming this year was in the recent category as opposed to the classic games.
Same, because we both played Valiant.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. But I think it's more of an indication of the games in that category that I'm playing. So like, there's that Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. It's a gacha game. It's all about microtransactions, and I log in daily to just do whatever it is that I'm going to do to avoid spending money on the game, and then check back in 8 hours or whatever. That's far and away what's driving my recent game hours. And if you remove that, it's like overwhelmingly classic. And I would be curious if they separated that classic into, games from 8 to 15 years ago, and then beyond 15 years, that retro category. I'm probably playing a lot of the retro. I'm going back to Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. I'm going back to games like that, the Monkey Island games, the Space Quest and King's Quest collections that I have. Those are the games that I'm like chasing that nostalgic feeling for, and they're still in my library. I spent money on them within the last 5 years because I still want to have those games from 20 years ago.
Well, I think that's an odd one, is that idea of nostalgia. So I can give you 2 examples, and they're both Final Fantasy. One's Final Fantasy 7, one's Final Fantasy 8. Okay, deal. Final
One
Fantasy
of them is
8,
terrible.
No, when I play it, and I do once in a while fancy a playthrough of it, when I do play Final Fantasy VIII, the feeling is very much the nostalgia kick. I load it up and I hear the Balam Garden music, and there's the awkward junctioning system, and there's just the characters. Something about it. It takes me back, and I really feel like a kid playing the game again. I don't get that with 7, actually. With 7, I just feel like it's a fresh new game ready to play every single time. It's not the nostalgia that appeals to me with that. It's definitely playing a part, but it's not the prime, overwhelming feeling. And I think it's odd that there's these 2 different ways that I play classic games that I've loved since I was a kid. Okay, I didn't love 8, let's be honest. But they have wrapped themselves into my brain in a very, very different way. Final Fantasy 7 always feels like a current experience when I play it, whereas 8 is a very conscious attempt to grab a hold of a bit of childhood and get it back for a few days or a few hours.
I would say within those two games, I kind of see them differently as well. I definitely don't feel like I ever go back to 8 with the expectation of like, this is going to be a fun new playthrough of this game. This is going to be like a challenging experience where like
in so many ways.
Yeah, I'm going to say in Final Fantasy VII, one of the challenge runs that we've talked about, where I'm going to try and get 99 of every item that you can actually get 99 of. That's a fun challenge to add to my experience of Final Fantasy VII. In Final Fantasy VIII, it's like the challenge is finding a way to enjoy the game again.
Yeah.
In 7, it's like I'm going to make it a little more difficult for myself because I'm going to enjoy this playthrough anyway. But in 8, it's like this playthrough is going to suck at certain points. Like I'm going to hit that point where I'm in the rocket facility that you have to shut down. I'm just going to be like, this is tedious. This is a lot of walking back and forth, talking to people. I'm not enjoying it, but I have to get through this, and then there will be other points in this game that I do remember enjoying that I have to get to. And it really is that like the nostalgic feeling from 7 isn't what's driving me. It's the game still is enjoyable. Whereas with 8, it's overwhelmingly the nostalgic feeling that is getting me back to playing that game, because the game itself doesn't still have that joy to it for me. And that's a personal thing. I'm not just saying Final Fantasy VIII is an objectively shittier game. It is, but that's not what I'm saying right now. Now I'm talking about something else.
It's what you're saying now, but it wasn't what you were saying like 2 sentences ago.
Yeah.
You've moved on.
That was ages ago.
Yeah, you've evolved. Everything's changed.
You're a new banana.
Yeah, new banana who recognizes that Final Fantasy VIII is terrible.
But I think this is tangential to the point, but it's an idea actually which I think is important, because we're talking about these games now and what's available on Steam and what we've been playing. And this is because Steam, GOG, just having the files, whatever it might be, the PC is very, very friendly to backwards compatibility. Mm-hmm. It's not perfect, but there's almost always ways to do things. There's almost always compatibility modes that you can launch, run your computer in XP mode, Windows 8 mode, whatever. Fallout 3, if you want to play that today, it had a RAM limit, I think a 2 gigabyte RAM limit. No one has 2 gigabytes of RAM anymore except for this piece of shit laptop. So you can go in, edit the INI file, and it's recommended online. When you launch the game, do this, and it's going to run much better. You'll avoid crashing, etc., etc. It's very much made for this. Consoles, by their definition, aren't. And you can see that really in the naming system for them. Xbox is an odd one because they jump around, but just look at the PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They've come in order, and they're meant to advance and not really build upon each other. And you can see over some of the consoles, there's been a lack of backwards compatibility too. If you imagine the PlayStation 4, for example, you couldn't play PlayStation 3 games on it. So that whole generation of PS3 games was largely lost unless you owned a PS3 and still owned a PS3 and still had the discs that were in good enough condition to be used. And that's just a way that console gaming is so inherently different to the PC. We almost guarantee and design a system which is going to lose our games as time moves on, which I think the PC by its very nature doesn't encourage. It's almost better by definition at archiving and allowing you to maintain these.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And it is interesting in those consoles where backwards compatibility was maintained. I genuinely appreciate it, but like it's clearly an effort on the people making the consoles to include that they don't want to invest in, because I imagine it's really tough to kind of measure the return on that investment of time, to say that like how many people bought this console because it was a good console and it maintained that backwards compatibility. That's not a metric that you get data points on. That's just, you get to believe that's part of the decision-making process for gamers. But for me, like loading up on the Switch and having that like bare bones subscription policy to Nintendo's program, you get the Switch's Super Nintendo emulator as part of that. So I have, Final Fantasy games, I have Kirby games, I have Super Punch-Out that I can play on a console whenever I want through that service. And it's part of why I buy that service. Like that, the whole reason that I have that. I don't do a lot of online multiplayer on Nintendo games. I have PC. I do most of my multiplayer gaming through PC. So for me, I have a subscription service to a service I don't use, except in the sense of emulating games that I enjoyed from when I was a kid. So
Well,
there's still clearly a market for it.
I'll say it's purely anecdotal, but from my side, it's a very similar situation with the PlayStation 5. So I owned a PlayStation 4, I had my games on the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 came out and I didn't buy it, and in the end, what I say to myself and say to friends is I bought the PlayStation 5 because I wanted to play Final Fantasy Rebirth when it came out, and it was the only way. And that was one of the ways they pushed me to buy the console. The other way was knowing I wasn't losing my PlayStation 4 stuff. The fact that you had the backwards compatibility between PlayStation 5 and 4 was a massive push to me getting it. If I'd have had to keep the PlayStation 4 as well, and then have them both set up, and probably have to be juggling HDMI cables every now and again to make sure I could play the games I wanted to on whatever day I wanted to, I probably wouldn't have bought the PlayStation 5. So it's purely anecdotal, but that ability to be able to have the backwards compatibility, at least across one generation, really made a huge difference for me in deciding to make the upgrade. But at the same time, on the PlayStation, there's a similar subscription service, which has a few different tiers. There's a PlayStation Plus, and I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's something like PlayStation Plus Basic, Premium, whatever it might be. The Premium one allows you access to PlayStation 1 games. Quite fucking good ones as well. Dino Crisis is on there, the classic Resident Evils are on there. Legend of Dragoon, games that really don't have another way to be played, but they've priced themselves out of it for me. So I wonder where the limit is sometimes for us when it comes to backwards compatibility. We definitely want it, but how much of a difference does it make in our purchasing habits, and how much are we willing to spend just to be able to play these old games?
I think that's a really tough thing to put a number on, because a lot of us, we bought these games once. We feel like we should always have access to them. We shouldn't need to spend more money on them. Clearly, in certain circumstances, we will spend more money on them. But some of us won't. Some of us will. It's a really tough kind of specific thing to pin down, to say, like, where is the line for the gaming community, when that line clearly varies so much from person to person.
Do you have a game,
especially for game to game? Like, I don't care about Dino Crisis. It's a good game. I'm not gonna go back to play that. I will to play Final Fantasy VII. They're on the same console.
Well, do you have a game that you would like to go back and play, but you wouldn't pay extra money for? You see, for me, that's Breath of Fire 3. I really liked it when it came out. I've got some kind of fond memories of playing it. And if it was on my console and I had access to it, I would probably actually put the time in and play the game. But I don't want to pay for it, because I do feel as though I paid for it that once, and it's not great enough to earn the right for me to buy it again. Do you have anything that's in your mind like that? A game that you liked, you didn't love, you wouldn't drop money on it now, but if it was just there, you'd play it?
Crash Bandicoot. Like every Crash Bandicoot game. Every single one of those is a game I really enjoyed, but I would not spend more money on getting that game back. And I feel like it's very similar. The Jak and Daxter games from earlier consoles, those are wonderful games that I really, really enjoyed. I'm not going to spend money on getting that experience again, but like, I have those fond memories. And if somebody were like, you can play those games again for free, I'd probably play them. But if they were like, you can give me money, nope. Got other stuff I could do.
Well, this is where you find yourself approaching something of a more ethical question, just a philosophical question. Is, in the terms and conditions, the answer is pretty clear as a no. But from what feels right, does it feel as though we bought that once and we should now have an almost eternal right to that game throughout the rest of our lives? So if I could prove, for example, that I bought a PS1 copy of Crash Bandicoot, maybe I could scan the barcode. It'd have to be more secure than that, but you take my meaning. should we then get the rights to any digital copy that appears? Should that then be ours?
Well, I will say that nowadays they've redefined what it means to own a game. So many of the titles that you have.
Yeah, no, this is it. Like the terms and conditions, like I said, are very clear.
Yeah, right, exactly. You don't own a game. Right, exactly.
No. Yeah, this is why I wanted to just close that one first. If we're going down the legal path, there is a very, very clear answer. But I want to go by what feels right. Because I think you could say also very clearly that doesn't necessarily have to feel right. You might actually believe, well, I bought it once, but no, things have changed. Time has moved on. I didn't maintain that copy. I haven't kept in good condition. I could have kept my old console. Why should I get access to the new digital one? Which is not what I think, but I think you could say that.
Well, I was going to go down that road because, like, I do believe that if you've ever bought the physical copy, that should hold up. Because I still have my Baldur's Gate Collector's Edition gold discs.
Don't tell anyone, it's actually Dark Alliance.
It's that came with the music soundtrack and a bunch of. Anyway, my point here is that, like, if you ever had the hard copy of that, and even nowadays, if you have a hard copy version that they release, like I think Elden Ring did one, that should translate to ownership.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree, especially just because of the nature of the technology. You're not paying for a disc when you buy a game. You're paying for the data that's on the disc. That's what I actually purchased. So to say that, like, oh, you didn't maintain your physical copy of the game, you shouldn't be entitled to the digital copy of the game. Like, I bought the game. The medium that you used to deliver the game to me, that was a limitation that you had to deal with. That's not what I bought. I didn't buy a disc. I bought the game. I bought Baldur's Gate 1 on 6 discs. And if one of those discs has a scratch on it, now I can't install the game properly. Like, I bought the game. I fundamentally feel like this is one of those things where gaming industry execs, gaming company leaders made this decision to say that purchasing a game is not ownership. And philosophically, that just doesn't hold up. It's nonsense. It's very much a marketing ploy to say we are absolving ourselves of responsibility because of the purchase you've made. We're saying it actually only entitles you to this. And that conversation didn't happen when the purchase was made. And I don't think you can retroactively go back and be like, no, you were purchasing a license. You were essentially renting this from us. No, that's not what you said when I bought the game. You can't suddenly redefine the framework of that transaction.
I think it's a thing that you could, even if it was in the terms and conditions way back when, a lot of countries, mine included, there are many laws about what goes into these long license agreements. And generally, if it's deemed that it's long enough that the average person isn't going to be reading it on a regular basis, most of the things in there don't actually have legal value anyway. Mm-hmm. And it's going to end up on the individual decision of a judge or whatever if anyone went to court for the ownership of this. Now, I agree. The entire battle around, maybe that's a grandiose word, but voila, the entire battle around the ownership of games and what you are actually purchasing upon paying for that, and I think now we would refer to it as paying for the license, is just very much, it's a legalese ploy and nothing more than that, designed to tie us up in a way that we know that there's no point pushing back against. And it's really grim, because I agree with you that philosophically it doesn't sound like I'm buying a disc. It sounds like I'm buying a game.
And I definitely see that that legalese aspect of it, where if you read some of these contracts, some of these terms and conditions, the end user license agreement, you'll notice lines that say, like, the game publisher, the manufacturer, whatever it is, reserves the right to change this contract at any time. And it's just like, if you put that into a contract, it's not a contract anymore.
Yeah. Also, that would never
it's basically stand. Yeah, you're basically asking me to write you a blank check, and whatever you decide to do with that, I've already agreed to. That's nonsense. So overwhelmingly, I feel like this is just the industry pushing that legal boundary to give themselves as much leeway as possible. And we all just kind of accept it because the odds of us being involved in any kind of legal dispute are so low. But if it ever becomes an issue, I think we all need to take a look at these license agreements and just be like, no, this is horseshit.
Well,
You are without a
saw
doubt
this.
providing nothing and demanding that we agree to it.
Well, we saw this not that long ago, and it's not exactly along the same lines, but remember when Disney had that issue? I think someone got hurt at their park or died at their park, and it was decided by Disney that the only way that the claimants could make a claim based upon this was via their own internal arbitrage system, due to the fact that they'd signed up for Disney Plus X amount of months ago. It's a nonsense condition. Did it get thrown out? It must have got thrown out. Because it's something that you could never reasonably think you were signing up for when signing up to this really sinisterly named end user license agreement. When it's got that many syllables in there, it just feels a bit dirty. It feels like something's going on there. But it's just like you said, it's almost, it's not impossible, but it's incredibly unlikely that you're ever going to end up in a legal situation with this, because if you do break your disc, you're probably just going to go and buy the game again. If something corrupts, you're probably just going to move on. You're not going to bring this up. But I do wonder how many of these more awkward, more finicky, more trashy ideas that they put into these contracts, I wonder how many of them would ever hold up if they were genuinely brought up in a court of law.
That's where my concern is that we almost get to this like standard boilerplate language that is inherently flawed. This across the board industry wide standard of saying you agree to these terms and we reserve the right to update these terms that you've already agreed to. Like it almost feels like we need somebody on the front lines attacking these end user license agreements before they become an issue. Right. So that when it finally arrives that, there's actually an issue that the gaming community needs to raise against publishers or developers or whatever, and we get to that conversation, we're not starting at, the end user license agreement is horseshit because it basically absolved their hands of any wash their hands of any responsibility. And that's something that I had to buy the game, install on my system, and then launch it to even see that contract that I apparently had already agreed to. It's just nonsense.
It reminds me a lot of WWE contracts, and these are turned up in court at various points. And there was a paragraph, and I've just found it again because it's astounding. So it says that individual waives and discharges the wrestling promotion from all liability or damage to the wrestler, ... resulting in serious or permanent injury to the wrestler or the wrestler's death, even if caused by the negligence of the promoter. There's no way that would ever hold up. But it's just an extra thing that stops people wanting to challenge it as well, because most people don't have the means to go to court. And I think a thing that often gets overlooked when it comes to legal battles, for example, so let's say if you're being frivolously sued for something, the fucking stress that puts on you, even if you know you're fine, even if you know really, okay, I know this is nonsense, I know this is bullshit, I know that eventually it's going to go to a judge, he's going to throw it out. The stress that puts on you with that one tiny scintilla of doubt in the back of your mind that says, but what if? Those sleepless nights that you're going to have from that, the shock that you're going to have from that, the trauma that you're going to have from that is going to really put you into an awful condition, psychologically and probably physically. So if you can avoid getting into that in the very fucking first place, you will avoid doing it. So you will decorate these EULAs with all of these clauses and conditions, meaning that any legal battle against it is going to take weeks, months, years. No one wants to do that for a game.
Yeah.
No one. You will just buy it again or move on or whatever the case may be. Meaning that most of these awful things will probably never get challenged. Never, unless essentially you have a legal firm take it on as a point of principle more than anything else, which doesn't feel that likely.
That's exactly it. You basically need somebody who has the means to throw away money at a problem that hasn't become a problem yet, but has the potential to be in the future. To just say, I'm going to take on this legal battle. I'm going to retain a legal team for a year and a half so they can discuss these contract terms that have no real enforceability. And then I'm going to go on with my life and never actually get to the point where I needed that representation. Because I'm never going to get that issue with a game developer where I have a legal battle against them. It's just not going to happen. And so we just
Yeah. When we get those super chats coming in, we'll set it up.
Yeah. But I think that's it. Like, we just end up letting it happen because, I mean, the odds of it being a problem for me, that it's just there, that it's an accepted practice.
100%.
Legal language wise, one of the funniest things I read was, you know, how Kiss was notorious for having green M&Ms in their hotel room. And I always thought that was the most superfluous thing I'd ever heard of. It was like, oh my goodness. The reason why they did it is so that they made sure that
promoter,
the venue read the contract.
Yeah.
And I thought that was genius after I understood that. I was like, oh, of course. That makes sense.
I think that's one of those things where, like, you hear that story and it gets framed in that way of them just being those ridiculous, entitled performers who want whatever they want. And if they don't get it, they'll throw a hissy fit. And it's rarely ever presented in the reality of what it is. Kiss has absurd pyrotechnics at all of their performances, and those are inherently dangerous.
Yeah.
So when you go to a venue and you say, these are the terms of our contract, you need to read and accept all of them, and they don't, then you find yourself in that position where then you start the legal battle, which is a long, drawn out process. Meanwhile, somebody has been injured or really just ruined their experience of this show because they didn't follow these terms. And so they put something in like there has to be exclusively green M&Ms. That way they know they get to their dressing room, there's a bowl full of just green M&Ms. The smallest detail has already been paid attention to. So when we go out and we set off the pyrotechnics, there's not that concern that, oh, they're aimed directly at a fan's face.
Well, and that's an industry where this has happened. 1992 tour, Metallica, James Hetfield got badly burned by pyrotechnics. 2005 or so, the rest of The Undertaker got burnt by pyrotechnics that were placed sort of on the ramp on the way down, and they just launched up over him. This happens. Like you say, Great White, that was the nightclub fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this happens. That's right. That was one of the worst incidents. Since that day, if I go into nightclubs, I look where the fire exits are. I just want to know. This happens, so they put those details in, like you say. And we hear about it in the wrong context. We hear it as sort of prima donnas. But when you actually see the why, it's a very clinical reason why. It's the same thing as the McDonald's hot coffee case.
I was just about to make the comparison there.
Yeah, it's exactly the same idea where we think of it as this really frivolous case. And in the end, it's not. It's a person who I believe was trying to sue for their medical costs first and foremost. They got an insulting offer. The legal team wants to then push for more. And we forget the entire time that, if I can be briefly vulgar for a second, this woman's were fused to her fucking leg. Like real, genuine damage. And we talk her as, oh, she burned herself a bit on coffee. No, there's a lot more to it.
Yeah.
But
and the investment that McDonald's made in that propaganda afterwards to present this as a frivolous lawsuit, to present themselves as the victim when they horribly disfigured this woman with their own negligence, is exactly why these terms and conditions exist. And it's more to protect the people who are vulnerable in those situations than to protect the wealthy. And when you look at the end user license agreements and the terms and conditions for video games, it's not that at all. It is to protect the wealthy.
Well, to bring it back a little bit, because we're
raging now.
Yeah. We're just furious about consoles.
Yeah.
We were talking about video game consoles.
Yeah. The original point, which I'm glad you guys are doing the, branching off. But, originally we were talking about how the consoles and how they, stay relevant through modern day and stuff. But you mentioned something earlier, when you talked about how like classic gaming was 10 years ago. It doesn't seem like it. There is something too, I think, the graphics related to the technology. There's been a curve and it's kind of flattened out. Because even when the PlayStation came out with the PlayStation Pro, they came out with this videos like, see, you can see the difference. And it was like, nobody could see the difference. And it was like, it did worse to promote the PlayStation Pro coming out than it did to help it. But, people are going to buy it just because it's a PlayStation Pro. But I think there has been a bit of a flattening of the technology because I may not articulate this well, but, I'm old. And
I think you've done a tremendous job.
So back in the day, of course, I've played Zork. I played those.
I understood that perfectly.
Yeah,
Well-
don't undersell yourself, man.
But I would play those text-based, keyboard games, and I didn't like games like Oregon Trail, because they were mostly a school game. And I didn't want to be reminded of being in school. So when everybody has these fond memories of Oregon Trail, I hated it, because if I played it, it just meant that I was like doing something from school. So I didn't have anything to do with that. So I always wanted to kind of like stay on the edge of the cusp of the graphical trend of whatever was going on. So, NES, then the SNES, whatever. But as far as consoles, I didn't do too much. I went to PC more or less. And going from the graphics card that was built in to an AGP for things like Half-Life and stuff was like, wow, that's what I would do. And so you could see those leaps quite substantially back then. Whereas now, if we go into I've seen some stuff already for the 5,000 cards coming out for NVIDIA, and they're pretty amazing. But what's really going on here is that the Unreal Engine, mostly the Unreal Engine, is doing such a really good job of being able to pave the road so that a lot of different graphic cards and even ones that are still in the 3,000s can run on some of these games that in the past, the equivalency, that wouldn't have been there. So I think the software has done a really great job of integrating some of the more modern graphical fidelity issues that we've had in the past. So that's why I don't think you see as much of oh wow, that was classic back then, and now this is not so much. Whereas every 5 years or so, we would see a huge leap. We're not seeing that as much. So I think that's kind of neat.
The one that actually not shocked me, but I really enjoyed in the last few weeks actually was obviously Final Fantasy VII Rebirth now is coming to PC. I was thinking, how can I address this? Just say it. It's coming to PC. Thankfully, 11 months after the original release on PlayStation 5, we're getting better. That's not too bad as an exclusivity period. I'd like to see it down a bit more, but 11 months, pretty good. And there were videos of the PC version compared to the PlayStation 5 version and so forth. And honestly, they're different, but they're not that different. And as someone who doesn't sit 6 inches away from their monitor screen when they're playing this game, you're sat on the couch 8 feet away from the TV, which is playing the game. The difference is going to be so negligible that I don't think it really does make a difference now. We genuinely, I know we do this all the time with technology where we say, well, we've gone as far as we can now. It doesn't get any better than this. But I do think possibly with video gaming graphics, there may not be that far to go. And possibly those quantum leaps that we do make, they're probably done.
I think it's kind of interesting because we think of that advancement in technology within gaming in the terms of graphical integrity, to say like how realistic can you make a game. And when we look at the advancements in console gaming, overwhelmingly it seems like that's the goal, is upgrade processing power, upgrade graphical presentations, basically just improve the system overall in that regard. But when you look at the way that Nintendo approaches their advancements in consoles, they focus on different aspects of gaming. I mean, Wii was one of the most popular gaming console purchases ever, and it was not HD in an era where gaming consoles could be HD. Nintendo definitely focused on the technology of the human machine interface, the way that you play the games, and I don't know if it's an indication that of the actual value of that Nintendo achieved success with that, but it's definitely an interesting way to go about it, to say that like we're going to come out with a new console and our focus on the new console is not going to be improving the power of the machine. It's going to be providing you with a new technology to play games in a way you never have before. And we're seeing that with, virtual reality machines now, and a lot of these motion capture kind of devices. They seem to have moved away from this kind of video capture with, things like the Xbox Kinect or whatever it was, and the PlayStation had some equivalent hardware. And now it's we'll put a console or a controller in your hand, and that'll make, actually capturing your movement a little easier. But I think the idea is more that the gaming industry seems to kind of agree with that idea, that we've gone about as far as we can in terms of graphical integrity. The next leaps will require advancements in technology in terms of, maybe quantum computing, to say that, like, we just need more processing power. We need a system that's not going to burst into flames as we get more and more realistic. So while we're waiting for that technology to advance, let's kind of look at other avenues where we can improve our consoles. And I kind of like that idea. A lot of the Switch games become more fun because of the interface that you have to those machines. But I don't know if I trust these, the titans of the video gaming world, Xbox, Sony, and Nintendo, to make the decisions about what the future of console gaming should be, because overwhelmingly they're going to make decisions based on what is best financially for those their companies, and that's not the driving force between an industry. I feel is artistic. It feels like you're going to end up making the wrong decisions if that's your driving motivator.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to think that maybe a big point that you hit on, that maybe, the graphics aren't going to be what we think about when we move on from console to console now, from generation to generation. And the thing that just shocked me was I was doing a bit of Googling in the background, and the PlayStation 5 has been out for 4 years. It doesn't feel like it. It feels like it's still the new console on the block. The PlayStation 1 only had a 4.5-year lifetime until the PlayStation 2 came out. And then look at the difference between those two, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2. That is really night and day between those two. If we release the PS6 tomorrow, I don't know what the point of it would be.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see how you could make any great grand leap from the 5 to the 6 in a way that people are gonna give a shit about. Yeah, you could definitely make improvements, because we have made hardware improvements in the last few years. But honestly, most people playing these games don't give a shit about the real minutia of good graphics. As long as the graphics are good enough, we're fine. So it might be interesting to see, if when the PlayStation 6, if when the next Xbox, if when the next Nintendo rolls around, if they might have had more chance to think about what else can we do to make our console new, because it might not be enough now to say that, oh, this has an extra core, or this renders lighting better. We might need to do something different in the way that Nintendo did with the Wii, in the way that Nintendo did with the Switch. And I agree with you that just playing games on the Switch, there's something about it that's just nice. In itself, it feels good to play, just for the uniqueness. So maybe we'll see something new and interesting in that next generation. I don't think we will, but maybe.
Probably not, but we can hope.
It would kind of appear that if there's going to be a jump, it would be where the consoles could run at higher frame rates, because right now that's the biggest moniker against them, is that they're running at 30 frames per second, whereas I'm going at 60 to 120 easy on the PC on the same game. And you'll notice it, you'll feel it, because
even then I wonder how many people care outside of the gaming community, outside gaming, because to do that classic line,
the game, it doesn't matter. But
to do that classic thing online, Twitter isn't the real world, Reddit isn't the world. I think most people when they play don't mind. And these consoles now, Final Fantasy Rebirth, I played it on 60 all the way through. I wonder if I see what you mean. And 30 to 60, there's a difference that you can feel as you play.
You'll feel
100%.
it. You'll feel it.
I was going to say, I feel like that it's that diminishing returns from 30 to 60, very noticeable jump.
God,
60 to 90, not as much. 90 to 120, I'm probably not noticing a single difference. And I mean, maybe that's me. I'm not particularly sensitive to, video.
And maybe the kind
issues,
of games we play, maybe with it not being the, itchy trigger finger shooter kind of things, maybe that makes a difference. I'm definitely with you generally that having a reliability of that would be nice as well, because consoles will drop below, and they will be intended to. They'll have games peaked at 45 or 30, wherever it might be. But the tech is definitely there now to already allow for 60. Like I said, Rebirth, and if you go and look at that, it's an intensive game, and they can run that on 60 consistently all the way through.
Yeah, we had talked off before we started recording about Starfield, and I played Starfield, of course at 60, and I thought it looked good, But I noticed there were times when I was in the ship, and that's what some of my favorite times when I was in the ship. It's like, why does it feel laggy? What is going on? And I found out that actually when it was first released, that the little reticule for the when you're flying goes to 30. They fixed that since then, but it would go to 30, and that I didn't know that was what's going on. It's like it feels like I'm pushing uphill, and that's exactly what was going on. It actually dropped down to 30 frames per second, and then they had you could get a mod
on a PC. So clearly, console is better,
right? But that, like I said, they later gone back and fixed that. But that's what I was saying, is that a lot of stuff that does come out on console does typically come out on 30, and then that's kind of like the whole like reason why people want to play on a PC versus console, and a lot of those type of titles. Not that Starfield's the title that you want to go searching for.
I'm curious, in thinking about the games that we play and the discussion of PC versus console. Is there any game that you've played recently, or you just remember very fondly, that you feel wouldn't translate to PC? You played on console and that's where it belongs?
Probably any Sonic game.
Those don't even belong on console.
Actually, the most recent Sonic game actually got pretty good reviews, and I haven't played it, but yeah.
Some of the more recent ones actually have been a lot of fun. I think the kind of the original platformer game, it was very much that, the characters had the appeal. The game itself was a little all over the place. Mm-hmm. And then they just kind of leaned into that, and their games got more and more ridiculous and not great in terms of gameplay, but the fun was almost that it wasn't a great game.
Yeah.
And now they have some Sonic games that have all of those quirky characters, and the game is good. And it's like, I'm not prepared for this.
Well, I think Sonic, honestly, it was never as good a platformer as many other games that came along at the same time. I mean, Rayman was a better set of games.
Yeah.
When you've just kind of platformers, they're outstanding. But even though Rayman is charming, it never had the charm of Sonic. There was just something about it. The goofiness helped. The characters were beautiful, fantastic. The absurdity of the spinning wheel and all of that.
Yeah.
Oh, there's something. Sonic is one of those games where it's got that X factor, and it counterbalances a lot of the shit factors that it also has. For a game that wouldn't work on PC, that works on console, I don't know if it exists, because you can always adapt. You can always break out your controller on the PC. But, I vastly prefer playing games on my console. And I think it comes down to just the idea of just the ambience and the feeling that you get from it. And if the PC is objectively better, if we say, yes, you can always get a higher frame rate, you can always get better technology, you can always have it running better, I'm still sat at my fucking desk the entire time. And if I'm not sat at my desk and I'm on the TV, but I've had to connect the cables to the TV so it can go, and then I've got to move my PC back later so I can go and play again. Or if I'm playing with the Steam Link, well, half the time that thing used to fucking drop off. So that was no bloody good. There was always something that had to be done, something that had to be wrangled. Whereas the PlayStation, I don't have to do that. I sit down on the couch, I push that one button in the center of the controller, and I'm done. There's nothing else I've got to do. It turns on, the game is preloaded because it's on rest mode always. There's something special about that. And I think it's very similar to the idea of going out for a few drinks with your friends. And you can go sometimes to the best bar in the world, or you can go to your friend's house party at the fanciest house in the world. And sometimes it's just less fun than the dive bar. It's just less fun than that grimy, dirty place that really punches above its weight. And that's what console gaming does, and that's why so many of us do it. The biggest proof of concept I think you can have for console gaming is the fact that it still fucking exists. It exists in a world of mobile gaming. It exists in a world of PC gaming. And I'm sure I read that back in 23 or 22, 21, console gaming overtook PC gaming for the first time in a long time. Is it market share? It's still behind mobile gaming, of course it is. But console gaming didn't fade out. It didn't fade away. It went from strength to strength. And you still have these massive companies that are built upon it. As we've talked before about Sony, when you think of Sony, your memories don't go back to owning a Sony TV. If you own a PlayStation, it's because you had the PlayStation. If you think of Nintendo, it's nothing else. You remember Mario. You remember their console games. And there's just something about them that's just fun. And I know that's a shit answer, but there's just something about them that works perfectly. And maybe it's the fact that they're solely designed for gaming.
I don't think that's a shit answer at all. I think
Good.
there definitely is there is a feature of console gaming that can't be put into words. And if I look back at, games I played on Super Nintendo, games I played on PlayStation 1, playing them on PC feels wrong. Not for any particular reason. Maybe just because the nostalgia I have is I played this on my couch as a little kid.
Yeah.
It belongs on a couch. And like, there's no logic to that explanation, but it's the reality of the situation. I'm not going to play Super Punch-Out at a desk. That feels wrong. I don't want to play Twisted Metal on a mouse and keyboard. That feels wrong. And it's not. There's no objective correct way to play those games, but there is.
But this is where the most honestly human thing you can say is that this might not have the most logic to it, but I like it.
Yeah.
Some things just feel good. Some things just are good, and you can't always explain it. It's like if you're asked to explain what soft is, like when you say something is soft, trying to explain the concept of why something is soft is the weirdest thing in the world. How do you do that? Or trying to explain what the color blue is to someone who ain't seen blue before. It's weird, and you feel it, and you know it right down in your core, but you couldn't put it into words if you really wanted to. And we can put a lot of stuff about console gaming into words, but there's just that little bit that we can't, where it just feels right. And the one other thing I was going to add to it, the idea of playing on the couch as well, is multiplayer is just better when it's couch co-op. It's just better. And you can play co-op games with your friends online, and you're in different rooms, in different homes. It's still great. You still talk to each other. It's not the same. And honestly, you could put two computers in the same room. It's not the same. When you're not sat on the same thing, when you're not facing in exactly the same direction, when you can't elbow the other motherfucker to make him miss.
Hold your hand in front of his face so he can't see the screen.
Bro, it's just different. It's just different. When you can't get up and just turn the console off because you're losing.
Yeah.
Not losing. I didn't lose. What?
Yeah.
It's just different.
So that everybody knows you're not losing.
The days of the LAN party. Hell, they even made like little kits where you could like take your PC with you and stuff. But I think one little thing that also I kind of would be remiss if I didn't bring it up is when I kind of like said Sonic, I remembered that a lot of those games back then were played on tube TVs. And so playing them on a flat screen, a monitor or TV even now doesn't have the same effect because the way it was drawn or made on to appear, like think of the old Doom games, Unreal and things like that, even Half-Life, were kind of made to be seen on a CRT. So that bulge gave the illusion of a 3D image much more so. So when we look back at it and we say, oh, yeah, these graphics really don't hold up. They didn't age well. No, they didn't, but you're also not seeing it on the right form of peripheral that it was intended to be seen on. So if we actually had that, and that's why actually you'll see a lot of purists who actually will find a way to get a tube TV and actually play some of the games on that because it emulates exactly kind of what they were trying to achieve with that look. So when I say like Sonic, I think I kind of meant almost any of those older titles, kind of not because you can't play them. It's just they don't hold up because we don't have the system that we can still play them with. It's kind of like when you take a analog recording and digitize it. Like I have like old records, Rolling Stones records, specifically where I can hear Mick Jagger breathing between the some of the music, and I can't hear that at all in digital. Like it's not there at all, but it's very clear in the analog in the LPs. And that's the difference. And it's like, it's not that perfect wave. We're not getting to play it on the same format that it was intended for. So I don't know. Like I said, I think you can play those, obviously, and people do. But if you really want to experience it, it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely part of it. I think there's probably a lot of our first experiences with games that we don't think of in terms of the details that made that experience what it is. And, for me, playing on a CRT, that was the only thing available when I was playing those games. So I didn't think of that as shaping my experience. But now when you look back and you're playing on, an OLED TV and it's, 4K and I'm still playing Final Fantasy VII, like, all right, this is probably not how they even viewed this game as they were developing it, because they were also limited by those things. You almost kind of learn about why you appreciated these games 20 years down the line when you're like, why doesn't this feel the same? Why is it not the same experience? But that being said, I do feel like, since we're on the topic of console gaming, we need to establish our favorite consoles individually.
Don't make me.
No pressure, but
Get my notepad.
the audience will tell you why you're wrong.
Oh, in that case, I'm in.
Yeah, yes. Confrontation. All right.
That was such a good crack. Well done. Wow. Ay. Well, I'm writing down very quickly a list of consoles that I've ever actually owned, which seems like a good place to start because there aren't that many.
Not a bad idea. It's going to be tough to pick from one of those ones that's not on the list. So
for my whole list is PS5, PS4, Xbox 360, PS2, PS1, Sega Genesis, and a ZX Spectrum, which was my brother's, but fuck that guy. I love my brother, he's great. Honestly, I think my favorite console was probably the Xbox 360. I think that hit a really sweet spot in just my age as well. So I got it when I think I was 18 or 19. So it was a really good time to be picking up that console. You're just about old enough. You got a bit of your own money. You got your own time. I wasn't living at home, so I could just kind of just play if I wanted to. There was never someone behind me, because obviously if I'm at home and there's chores to do, your parents are going to be on your back. If you're living outside on your own and there's chores to do, who cares? You'll do it tomorrow when it smells bad. That's fine. And there was something special about that. And there was a certain array of games which I think felt really good. And a lot of them I never finished. But there was some beautiful couch co-op on there. So we're going to go through Halo and Gears of War in particular. There were some interesting RPGs on there. And the ones that came to mind, or the one that came to mind, which I've never finished and we've talked about before, was Lost Odyssey. That was on that console. And that was something special. Yeah. It's a JRPG where you don't play as a fucking kid. And I mean, we could do with more of those, right? Because that is the thing that's stopping me playing Persona 3 right now, is I think I'm done playing as a high schooler. It doesn't feel right anymore. And then what we've talked about before with just how good that controller was.
Yeah.
And it being the first really that had that. The Xbox kind of got there on the original, but that final iteration of that Xbox controller was beautiful. So the combination of the games, the right time, the co-op element, and the controller. Xbox 360. The more I talked about it, the more sure I am. That's my favorite console.
I think
Legion's going to say PC.
It's NES. I mean, I did all my stuff on NES. I kind of I cut my teeth on the Atari, of course, but
must have hurt.
As far as consoles, but what I hated about the Atari was that the equipment kept breaking. Like, you wouldn't even rough it up, but the joysticks would always break, the paddles would always break, and then you didn't have that many games for the paddle, so it was kind of pointless.
And now that company makes Microsoft controllers.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true, but my Microsoft controllers always break. So
the more you know.
Yeah. Just make up facts and then put that display, the more you know.
I think we did plenty of that during our discussion of the legal debate.
Yeah.
Yeah, the NES was indestructible. It was almost like the Nokia phone of consoles. You could bust that thing up, beat it up. The only thing that's not going to work from time to time is the cartridges, and all you had to do was blow on it. And start working again.
Which was actually not what you were supposed to do at all, but it worked every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a point to raise after I give my favorite, but I feel like I have to give my favorite. I think for me, it's the Super Nintendo, and that's obviously colored by a lot of nostalgia, but like the games that were available on Super Nintendo and just kind of the era of gaming it felt like the Nintendo Entertainment System was where people were figuring out a lot of stuff about video game design, and the Super Nintendo era where people were polishing a lot of stuff about video game design. And we hadn't quite gotten to that, 3D gaming world where they had to really anticipate a lot of new stuff very rapidly. So this was very much like, we know what we're capable of. Let's find ways to kind of demonstrate mastery of that. That's what the Super Nintendo system felt like for me. This was, the game designers who were figuring things out in the Nintendo Entertainment System era were now demonstrating that they had figured it out in that era. So games like Super Mario World was incredible, and you still have people playing on that engine that they created in the 90s. And I for me, there's really nothing that captures that gaming experience of, wow, this feels incredible, the way that the Super Nintendo era does. But I think the point I wanted to make was that we all kind of let nostalgia play a part in our choices, and it feels like that's going to happen with most gamers our age and older, is their favorite console is not going to be the most recent console. And I'm just curious if our audience wants to get involved and let us know where they stand on these things. But like, for anyone who played just Xbox 360 and Xbox One, does the Xbox One ever really compete as your favorite console? Or are you always going to favor the 360 because maybe you were just younger and you didn't have that bitterness in your heart? Or maybe it was just, you had games from your childhood that shaped who you are as a person, and you associate them with that console, so the console holds a special place in your heart. I'm curious if anybody's favorite console is a PS5 or an Xbox Series X. Like, I would love to hear from you, but I don't know anybody my age who's played on multiple consoles where they're going to choose the latest generation as their favorites.
And I think that's honestly the key to the entire discussion about almost everything to do with video gaming and taste, and even about Veilguard. I wonder, because we talked about recently the idea, the general boring discourse around Veilguard, and the fact that we had the same boring discourse around Inquisition when it came out, and the fact we had the same boring discourse around 2 when it came out. If, again, what we're just seeing is a lot of people being disappointed that a game they remember from their childhood, which in this case now Inquisition, now has a sequel that they're not that fond of. In the same way that when Inquisition came out, there were people who'd played 2 who were disappointed that a sequel to a game they loved from their childhood had just come out. And how much of, the real bile, I don't mean the balanced sort of, balanced critique is an awful word, because it does devalue some of this, but I don't care. It deserves to be devalued. Some of the more balanced criticism of it, which the game definitely was capable of receiving, is definitely not perfect. And then you have the true venom behind it. And I just wonder if it's a very similar idea of it's changing something from your childhood that you became so attached to. And now you feel that it's kind of pissing on that ever so slightly. When you said about the consoles and the PS5 being someone's favorite, I did look at it for a second. I thought, is that my favorite? Because I love what's on there. And I love some of the games I've had on there. And then when I look down the list at the older ones, it just makes your heart beat differently. Mm-hmm. It just feels different. And I don't think it's just the fact that it's a long time ago. I don't think it's just the fact that you can't play them anymore. I can't play the Mega Drive anymore. I can't play the Spectrum anymore. I think it is just, like you say, it's attached to so much more in your life and was probably formative in some way. The Xbox 360, Commander Shepard actually got me into wanting to work out, not just play sports. Because there's that fucking pull-up scene with James. And Commander Shepard looked ripped. and I wanted big arms like Commander Shepard.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that's how I ended up here.
It's how we all grew.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it played a moment, and that just came into my mind as something that, yeah, actually in hindsight, that's attached directly to that console and to that memory. So of course, the Xbox is my favorite. 360.
And I'm curious, when considering those consoles, did any of us ever consider that a handheld console would be our favorite?
The PSP.
Just the way that my mind works, I didn't consider Game Boy, Game Gear, didn't consider Sony PSP. My console gaming ideology is consoles are systems that you sit down and play.
Yeah.
And portable consoles are a different category. I love some Game Boy games. I love some of my memories with Game Gear. But it doesn't feel like that's the same category when you say console gaming. That's not what I think of.
You've just reminded me that I had a Game Boy Advance and I forgot about it. And I liked the Game Boy Advance, and I think Golden Sun I played on it. I really, really loved Golden Sun. F-Zero was on there. And there are these little memories that I can pick out and grab if I want to. But the fact that I mainly played it in the car, or when I had nothing else to do, or when I was waiting for my mum to do some shopping, it didn't take on that invasive characteristic that the console had, which was whenever I'm at home, I want to go and play that. I think no handheld ever did that to me. It was always just a means to an end before I could get back to the console and play that for my actual gaming.
I know it's off topic here, but probably
off topic in our podcast. How dare you?
So, I would say by May, maybe March, we'll be playing Oblivion Remastered.
I'm in.
God, I hope this podcast comes out after March and you're wrong. I really hope it does.
So
I wanted to go back to Oblivion and Morrowind, but I tried playing and they feel too dated. So
Morrowind is tough going, isn't it?
and that needs to be the justification for spoilers, in my opinion. If something's old, it's still a spoiler. But if it's old to the point that nobody's going to go back and experience it the way it was originally, then it's a different story.
It was more that. It's anyone who hasn't played it by now probably doesn't want to and probably shouldn't.
But what it's going to be is going to be the most recent Unreal Engine, but the actual mechanics are the old engine. So you're going to be playing Oblivion the way it was, but with the new enhanced graphics. So it's just got to
sounds awesome to me.
Yeah. I mean, and my whole thing was why not Morrowind? And this is where I'm coming full circle on this. I'm why not Morrowind? Because Morrowind's story deserves it big time, because that is Bethesda's made a lot of mistakes over the years, tons of them. But the fact that they've made Morrowind is they always get a kind of a pass from me. It was okay, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And I've done this over and over and over with them because Morrowind is truly amazing. But that's not nostalgia, because if I wanted to go into depth about why Morrowind is so good and stuff, and that was one I think that was also on Xbox at the time as well, just when it first came out.
That's where I first played it.
And it's just an incredible story, not just a game, but it is an incredible story. But yeah, I mean, I think when you start taking nostalgia as a factor, I don't think it's the only factor that I look at it from. That's not my point of view. I always try to take that apart, because for me, I always thought it was a drop off at Oblivion. It was a drop off at Skyrim. I just enjoyed Skyrim so much more because of where you were in the frosty tundra area and all that other stuff. I just liked the areas better, and I thought the story was a little bit better too. But again, it would sound like I'm just breaking out of pure nostalgia when it comes to things like that. But I think Morrowind is the exception to the rule on that. And that's one, like I said before, that came out on console that you could find yourself saying, I love the Xbox because of my experience with Morrowind at the time, if you had played it back then.
I'm going to make a additional prediction. I don't think it's going to happen. The Oblivion remaster. Especially with the modding community that exists. The inability all of a sudden, unless they find a way to immediately get these mods ported over, and I don't see how that's possible when they're going to be working on a different engine entirely, I can't see a situation where people are going to be happy with that. In the end, if they do, good for them, although I'd rather they fucking hurried up with 6. it would be nice to have something like Morrowind done instead. Just because I feel that's such a bigger leap than Oblivion. Oblivion is still playable. It's clanky and it's a bit, but it's playable. I would go so far as to say that Morrowind, if you have any modern gaming sensibilities, is nigh on unplayable, especially for your first time. We could play it because we played it, and kind of had to grow up with a bit of that jank. And I mean, if you're from a certain generation of gamers, jank is a thing that's in your soul. You know, if you played the European games in particular, let's go. But Morrowind, I'd like to see that updated. Oblivion, I just can't see it happening.
Yeah, Oblivion was one of the first ones that was heavily modded, had a heavy mod community just because it was such a successful game. But the reason why I also say that it might is because of those mods. You got to remember, Bethesda's going now toward paid mods. And they're paying people to mod the game, and in which they get a percentage of that mod. So they want
they've been pulling this for how many years now?
Right, but before it was kind of always free. It was always out of the Nexus website. But now they're trying to integrate it into their own system so that way they can profit off of it. It's what they've been doing. So
they've been doing that for a long time. I don't know why that would make suddenly a difference for the Oblivion remaster, or why they would want to do that.
Well, no, and you're thinking of packs. I'm saying the actual mods.
No, I'm thinking of paid modding. This has been the thing for a while with the Creation Club. Then you had the ones that were included in the Skyrim. Was it remaster, Legendary?
Yeah,
that one.
Yeah,
when they brought them all over.
We're gonna have another one in another year, probably. Yeah,
exactly.
Next time you go to the dentist, it's going to be implanted in your brain.
Yeah,
somehow.
God, I hate that.
Skyrim is the new "but can it play Doom" meme.
Yeah, it is.
I'm going to be honest. When you were talking about an Oblivion remaster, I genuinely thought it was going to be a passion project from the modding community. I didn't think that was something that Bethesda would invest time and energy into. But there are people who are passionate about those games. I wouldn't have been surprised if the reveal was that the modding community collectively put together a remaster of Morrowind or Oblivion because it was important to them. I mean, I just, with the way Bethesda is going, I didn't expect them to return to previous entries and kind of revisit them and bring them back to the modern era. Although they released Skyrim 47 times, so maybe that's their whole thing.
Maybe that's what they are now.
Yeah.
I said March because I believe March is when Oblivion turns 19. And I think there's going to be a date associated with that because I think there's a developer update in January, I believe.
January.
Yeah. And then the next one's not till like June or something. So I do think they might say something in January and then it gets released in March. I wouldn't be shocked. Just saying, throwing it out there. I'll take.
Yeah.
Come back to us.
It would surprise me.
March and tell us how wrong Legion was.
Write it down. If I'm still
guarantee
alive.
you, Legion right now is timestamping these moments to make a fucking edit if he's right. Every time we said that it wouldn't.
Yeah, I'll be releasing a video in March. Like, remember when?
It's just going to be playing those clips of us telling Legion that he's wrong, and then just the sad music as we realize he's not.
Followed by an irrelevant clip of the new Elden Ring game.
Yeah,
an irrelevant clip. Come on, Legion.
That was pretty relevant. They're looking for Sony's looking for games that you can co-op and make do the whole Fortnite thing in.
It's like 3 days after the news.
No, we recorded before that, before the Game Awards.
No, like 3 days after the sale, that trailer comes out. Come on.
Oh yeah.
As though they've been doing that for 2 years, just in case Sony was waiting in the wings. Tut, tut, tut. The impression I get from that project, oddly enough, which I'm quite optimistic about, is apparently it's not being controlled by the main director. It's supposed to be a sort of secondary project for the studio. That interests me. If this is their way of letting someone else in the studio do something new and interesting and sort of try their luck with like an asset flip, essentially, like what Portal was, could be in for some fun. Very curious about that game. Very underwhelmed, but very curious.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with experimenting, that's for sure. Yeah.
It's the no 2-player mode confuses the fuck out of me.
It's going to be 4-player.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it has to be 1 or 3.
I spent so much effort making one friend, and now that's not good enough?
No, I can't think of a single group of just 3 people that I like enjoy spending time with.
Yeah, me neither.
End it there. End it there.
Well, let me just close your camera real quick. And thank you for watching The Gamer's Advocate -com. But as Banana said, is there's any other consoles that you think that we missed, or something that you wanted to input, or you think nostalgia's coloring our minds here with our preferences, definitely feel free to comment.
I think it absolutely is, but
100%.
I'm
Yeah,
curious to
we
open
called
that
it.
discussion up. I'd love to see somebody whose favorite console was, Xbox Series X, and hear about their experiences.
Hell yeah.
Please share if you have. In this case, it's differing opinions on something where I don't feel like I'm right. So this is your golden opportunity. I can't argue with you.
Very good. Very good. But we are also on Spotify, iTunes, and Apple. No, that's iTunes.
Amazon Music.
Amazon Music. That's it. There it is. So catch us there as well. Anyway,
Consummate professionals here at the Gamer's Advocate.
if you got this far, we know you like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We'll check you later. Bye-bye.
Friends forever.